A little bit ago, some friends and I decided we wanted to try to put together a War of 1812 living history group. Now, we all know each other from our jobs. We work at a museum and do War of 1812 militia living history animation. Now, I usually do militia, but I wanted to try to explore a different avenue of research, focusing more on civilian life, especially that of women. In particular, my research avenue is the life of a soldier's wife. So I have a work dress already, but that was kind of where the Regency era ended for me, and I decided that if I'm going to be investing all of this research and time into a living history group, I wanted to make sure that I did things right. So I'm starting from the skin out, and I'm working on a Regency petticoat to not only go underneath my work dress, but also other dresses from women of different classes as well. So it's kind of a multi-class garment. And I'm okay with that because no one's really going to see it. It's just there for support and to give that proper era-appropriate shape. So this is how I did it. My holiday project was supposed to be the petticoat pattern from the American Duchess book, but even though I had 6 weeks of break, I did not finish it in the holidays. So here we are. This is my first time using a gridded pattern, and this was a pretty good one to start with because there's only 2 pattern pieces that you need to scale up. And I used my mom's technique, which involves photocopying the original pattern, and then she traced down the grid, so instead of each square representing 2 inches, it represents only 1. And then the little dots represent the intersections of the grid, so you know that that will be on a point on the gridded paper to transfer it all. Enchanted Rose Costumes did a really great video on how to scale up gridded patterns, so I would definitely recommend watching that instead of trying to glean any sort of understanding from the word vomit I just presented to you. But if you did, good job. I only had to make a few changes to the pattern to fit my size better, and that was elongating the front part. So as you can see, there's a slash in the pattern piece with a smaller piece of paper underneath to fill it out, and that's just because I have a relatively longer torso and the original pattern was a bit too short for my shoulder area. So I placed it on the mannequin that I had for my size and then rearranged it and slashed it open to see how well that would work on her before putting it onto my linen and then cutting it out for myself. Because this is a bodiced petticoat and it requires support, the bodice part is kind of just like a really cute vest, honestly. It's not that challenging to put together, which is great because it's just an undergarment. Now the front part is very similar to how I finished my 18th century shirt from a few videos ago. You just cut down the slit for the front and then fold back the edges and finish it in whatever way you like. I did the mantua maker stitch for reference. And then of course you have to reinforce the bottom part because that is what will have the most amount of strain. If I had more patience, I'd probably do this all by hand, but I don't, at least for this project. So I just sewed together the side seams and the shoulder seams, and then I pinned down just a fold hem, and then I sewed that by machine as well. So the next thing that I worked on was the casing, and at first I started by folding down about, I don't know, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch hem, and then folded it over to make a wide 1-inch casing. There's no reason that it needed to be this wide, I just ended up doing that. So I'm going to be sewing along the edge everywhere except the part in between the pins where I'm going to leave it open so I can put the tape belonging to the casing inside. Then I'm going to sew on top of the casing, making sure to catch the tape so that can be the drawstring. This is a trick my mom taught me. You just put the end of your tape onto a safety pin and then run it through the casing. It's also useful if your hoodie strings fall out in the wash. And here you can see how I've just sewn down the tape in between the casing. The tape is a bit darker than the rest of the fabric. I didn't really have anything that was whiter, but when it's all gathered, you can't really tell. It doesn't really bother me in the first place that much anyway, so. Then I ran 2 machine sewn gathering lines across the top and pulled those gathering threads taut. Once I sewed that to the bodice and hemmed the skirt, I had the final product ready to put on my mannequin, and I love this pattern. I think it looks really nice. I don't think that I would change anything if I were to make it again, except maybe do some cleaner hand stitching. And the one thing too is that I find on one side the strap could probably use a dart to fit it better, but generally speaking that's not something that I'm not going to fix it because it's not really that big of a deal in the long term.